tape, but it doesn't require a lot of tape study to kind of analyze some of the things that are issues in that performance. We continue to be slow starters, and that's disturbing. We got to address that. But, some of our young guys who we push through this game, quite frankly, who are fighting for jobs are not executing enough detail to be strongly in consideration, and that's disappointing.
Andrew Luck got some good work in for the Colts in a 24-14 win over the Rams. He was 12 of 21 for 161 yards and 1 touchdown. I'm Pete Fox. This is NBC Sports Radio and the NBC Sports Radio app.
Consider this your invitation to sell. At buysellmakeoffer.com, you can sell as much as you want for the next 60 days without paying any fees whatsoever. Sound incredible? It is, and it's true. Buysellmakeoffer.com is the new exciting way to sell your stuff online. Make extra money right now. Sell your old car, furniture, video games, household items, clothes, even your home. Sell anything that's legal. Load up your stuff to sell right now at buysellmakeoffer.com. This is your official invitation to get on board to sell your stuff right now. Free for the next 60 days. And once you see how easy it is, you'll want to sign up for more because there are no item fees. That's right. Take this opportunity to move items from the other guys and sell it for free. You might even win a Samsung tablet, Amazon gift cards, and other cool prizes. BuySellMakeOffer.com is the future of online selling. You can use Skype to talk to your buyer or seller. Plus, you can use video to showcase your items. BuySellMakeOffer.com.
This is KCAA.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Karen Hopkin. This will just take a minute. Think about the tools used by biologists. Perhaps test tubes and microscopes come to mind. But what about diapers? No, it's not that investigators are too engrossed in their work to take bathroom breaks. Turns out the absorbent material in disposable diapers can be used to physically expand biological specimens and make them easier to see with a microscope. Researchers at MIT wanted to take a closer look at the connections that form between neurons in an intact brain, close enough so that they could see the actual molecules those nerve cells use to interact. That level of detail is beyond the resolution of conventional light microscopes, but what if the structures of interest could somehow be made bigger? That's where the diapers come in. Researchers found that they could infuse their tissue samples with acrylate, the superabsorbent stuff in throwaway diapers. The chemical forms a molecular mesh to which the tissue can anchor. Then, when the researchers add water, the acrylate swells, and so does the sample, which makes minute structures more visible. The technique is described in the journal Science. The researchers have used the acrylate swelling, or Huggies enhancement, or even Pampers amplification, if you will, to peer into the brains of mice, fruit flies, and zebrafish. Now, whether this nifty nappy maneuver will expand our understanding of life's smallest cellular mysteries, well, depends. Thanks for the minute. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Karen Hopkin.
As the owner of my business, I wear a lot of hats. I'm accounting, sales, and so much more. But I don't know marketing.
Let Dex Media be your marketing department. Our team can create a digital plan for you with everything from search to social. Contact Dex Media, that's DEX Media, to get found, get chosen, and get talked about.
Whoa, that's a job for cleanup, which would be me.
Call 844-230-3436 or visit dexmedia.com today.
Miss one of your favorite shows? Don't worry, we've got your radio DVR right here on KCAAradio.com. Log on and listen to any show you want, anytime you want, on KCAA 1050 AM.
Good morning. This is Empire Talks Back. I'm Wallace Allen on the case for truth and justice with the right information to help improve the situation. Folks, why is it that despite all of the warnings in the world sometimes that we receive well in advance of disaster or problems, potential circumstances of concern, that we don't necessarily prepare? Well, what's Wallace talking about? Well, it's 10 years since Katrina, one of the most devastating natural disasters that we've ever witnessed here in the United States. And we witnessed it I mean, television covered Katrina it like a blanket. Nothing we could do. It was a terrible vision. Matter of fact, it was so effectively covered that it appeared to be a movie as opposed to a real disaster. What is it about the fact that people were warned for days before that this was going to be a tremendous event, not able to tell you exactly what was going to happen, but danger's coming. Danger's coming, folks. Danger's coming in many directions. And if we don't respond better now than we did during the Katrina crisis, we're going to find ourselves with the type of disaster that has taken place in the past, taking place again in the future. Well, what are you talking about, Wallace? Well, first of all, we've got to consider natural disasters. If you're in California, if you're anywhere, natural disaster, that's why they call it natural. It's not something that hasn't taken place before, something that we aren't informed of. What do you have in your car? You're riding around listening to the show, and I appreciate that, and I hope that I can tell you something that's going to make you appreciate the fact that you've listened to the show. But disaster doesn't always give you a warning. But we've had enough warning about disaster to know that we should be prepared. Do you have an emergency kit in your car? Do you realize that possibly something could happen today and you won't get a chance to go home? Think about Katrina. Think about how many people thought that this was just going to be a rainstorm. Think about elections coming up. You're being warned that there's certain people out there, if elected, they're going to do things that maybe are not in your favor. Are you going to simply wait for these things to occur and then try to react? Or are you going to prepare for them? Schools. Our children are in schools that are not serving them. We've been warned. We've been alerted. We've been told the disastrous results of poor schools. What are we doing about it? Are we stepping up? Are we getting to the right attitude to move ourselves from the positions of non-compliance to common sense to paying attention and doing the right thing? What are we going to do, folks? That's up to us. You can get prepared for the next potential Katrina, the next flood, the next snowstorm, the next drought. Or we can pretend that it's not going to happen. I don't know. I hope that we're going to do things that will demonstrate to ourselves and to our families and to our friends that we are prepared to live and that we are prepared to take the responsible steps toward living and doing the right thing for ourselves and our children. Not an easy thing to do. Most of us do not operate to our personal benefit. There are people here who are voting for folks that they know are crooked. They know don't have your best interest at heart. And how do you know that? Well, you can look at their past. You can see, what did they do before they ran for election? You know, do they expect us to believe that they turned into this benevolent, community-loving person after they get elected? If they weren't that benevolent, community-loving person before they got elected? And if they don't get elected, will they still work on the things that they promise, that they say are such sincere issues in our lives? If they lose the election, do they run home and hide, or do they stay out and participate in the streets to correct those things that they say were wrong? Folks, we've got a lot of power. We've got a lot of responsibility. We've got a lot of things that we can control that we're letting simply run out of control. We have in the studio with us Miss Cynthia Frazier. She is a mother, grandmother, concerned person who wasn't real happy with how she saw the schools going. Now, she didn't wait for her grandson to grow up and prove that his education wasn't sufficient because he ended up doing some crazy stuff and going to jail or killing somebody doing something stupid. She didn't wait for his lifetime to pass to see how it was going to be. She could project that, hey, the schools are not right. I've got a really smart little grandson that probably people are going to say maybe he's a little too smart. Maybe he's a little too aggressive. Maybe he just thinks he's too damn smart. Well, when you have a prodigy like that, when you have a youngster in your possession that you're responsible for, are you just going to send him off to school because the school said it's time for him to go to school? Or are you going to be sure that there is a school that's properly prepared to teach your child? This solution isn't for everyone, but now Miss Frazier is no longer check it out, a parent, a grandmother. She has determined that her grandson's schooling was important enough that she encouraged and got involved with homeschooling. And homeschooling, just like public schools, regular schools, charter schools, they have a system, a bureaucratic system. They have a school board and all that stuff, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Well, let's say hello to Miss Cynthia Frazier. Good morning, Cynthia. How are you?
Good morning. I'm great. Thank you.
Well, as we talk about preparing for disaster and preventing disaster because of moving in an actionable way, we want to salute you for taking action on the school district, on homeschooling, and getting yourself involved with your grandson's schooling. Tell us how and why you decided to do that.
Well, my grandson was attending what was considered to be a really good school. It was a charter school, revolutionary in some ways. And
no, you've got to come closer to the mic, Cynthia. I'm sorry.
This mic?
No.
Okay.
No, my mic. I need you to talk into my mic. Absolutely. I'm bringing you in
everybody.
to demonstrate, your intellectual prowess and how strong you are in vision and seeing in the future. And I ask you to step up to your mic and you say, my mic or your mic?
I know, because I feel like okay. I'm going to have to take
okay.
a bite, but that's okay. It's close. So anyway, in second grade, we started experiencing issues that a lot of parents are experiencing today with their children in terms of what you said. Some of these children are extremely bright. They are very active, particularly our boys and especially our African American boys. They learn in different ways, but schools haven't really adjusted to the whole child. So we started experiencing some challenges even in kindergarten. He wasn't raising his hand. Can you imagine getting sent to the office because you're not raising your hand?
Well,
you're simply blurting out the answer, and you're expected to know that. So at what point, I finally asked the question.
He wasn't raising his hand, but he was answering the question.
He was answering the questions, but he was blurting it out. He always wanted to be first in line. I remember in kindergarten, his teacher told me, she says, well, he always wants to be the leader. And I said, okay. And she says, well, I can't do that because, I have
there may be some
25
other
kids
who need to have leadership brought out from them. And rather than try to follow the example of your grandson, we're going to try to plant a brand new seed into these other kids who don't appear to want to be leaders, but we're going to bring this leadership thing out by holding your grandson's leadership
pushing
desire
him to the back of the line.
Because he's too early with it.
Exactly.
Nothing common about common sense. and these are the kinds of things that we have to deal with. Mr. Evans, Leonard Evans, is on the line. He is my consummate friend and interrupter of my casual thought and brings me to the emergency level quite often. One of the things that he has said that we should talk about, and I think we are doing that, is the issue of race, the issue of politics, and of course my issue is emergency preparedness, and I think politics are an emergency, education and race are emergency issues. And as we look at what's happening with your grandson in school, we can unfortunately go all the way back to when Mr. Evans and I were in grade school about 500 years ago.
Oh my.
And see the same type of issue, you know, where I know Mr. Evans had friends in school who later in life were heavily interested in chemistry and pursued those kind of adventurous things, but the school district didn't want little smart kids sitting around trying to make bombs and stuff and other explosives and fooling around with the. So how much encouragement, Mr. Evans, were students given to be, when you were coming up, to be individuals, to act out their individual desires, or were we supposed to get in line even at that point?
Well, it was interesting. I was extremely fortunate as a child because I got to go to 3 different schools in the course of within 2 years. First grade and then second grade. And I was able to look back and compare the difference between a public school, a private parochial school, and a private school that was focused on experimental methods. And the last one is where I stayed, and they had understood that every kid is different. You just want to get them going, see what they're interested in, let them grow. Mm-hmm. And so we were able to do a very wide variety of things. Just to give you an idea, my science teacher, this is grammar school now, her name was Fermi. She was actually the daughter of Enrico Fermi, who led the team that did the first atomic reaction in Chicago, part of building the atom bomb. Now, she didn't teach us all that stuff, but the idea is that we had very knowledgeable people around us, and we were given a lot of freedom. Now, I could go on. We had weaving and clay, and we did things in a kiln, made jewelry, had wood shop. We're talking kids 6 and 7 years old working around power machines and building a lamp, turning a table leg, all that kind of stuff.
And you were... And
shown a lot of films that showed how things work. It was a combination of things, but not much homework, hardly any homework.
But it was a comfortable situation for you.
Very.
And you were not being pressured about a lot of race issues at that particular point, correct?
No, my mother was being constantly reminded, and she would have to tell people to mind their own business. You know, does he know he's black?
Mm-hmm. Well, now, and that's very interesting circumstance, because you were in a schooling circumstance where, as we talk about today, young black boys are the first ones to be referred to the principal. They are the ones who end up with the big disciplinary list. These are statistics that we can look at. I'm not making this stuff up. Little black boys go to suspension and stuff at 3 times the rate of everybody else on them. Yeah. So we see that as an issue. Your parents saw that as a potential issue, shielded you from that, put you in a private kind of circumstance with school where, as we talk about it, race
They didn't shield us. They told us about these things, so we were aware of it.
Well, understand. Let me move on to a large news event that lets us know about disaster preparedness, because our parents prepared us for the disaster. Emmett Till. I remember, I was raised in Joliet, Illinois, outside of Chicago. My parents were from Mississippi, and we went to Mississippi 2 or 3 times a year, hopping Dad's big old car and, 80 miles an hour to Mississippi, straight down the highway. It was adventurous to me. One of the things, however, that I remember is as I started school, when you go to school, first grade, you got all your friends at school and you take pictures, and we all have our little wallets with our friends' pictures and stuff. Well, I remember after that initial first grade year of taking pictures, we were getting ready to take one of our trips to Mississippi, and Dad pulled me over and said, let me see your little wallet. Well, I had a wallet that, can kind of keep me working, wanted me to have a nickel or a dime or something in my change purse. But I also had pictures of my friends from school, not just little black kids, but the little white kids. He removed all of the pictures of the white kids out of the wallet because we were going to Mississippi. I didn't quite understand what all of that meant. And then the Emmett Till murder took place. All of the issue of them and their concern and us going to Mississippi took a very different look for me, an attitude different. I saw them respond differently. Leonard, when the Emmett Till murder occurred, did you hear about it? Did your parents?
Oh, it was a big deal.
Did your parents give you the disaster preparedness warning about how to act around police, how to deal with strange people who were looking at you strange and crazy?
Oh, yeah.
I remember disaster preparedness being executed on me as a youngster, reminding me that the world did not necessarily appreciate young black boys, and that we had to be careful about how we moved around and how we acted out our feelings. Young Emmett Till had a stutter. His parents taught him that when you feel yourself stuttering, whistle. It'll give you a sense of being and bring you back under control. That poor kid whistled, and that we know the story. He was accused of whistling at a white woman. The Mississippi goddamn occurred. He was murdered. I mean, it was a terrible thing that occurred to him. Thank the Lord for Jet magazine at the time. They printed the photos of the open casket that Emmett Till's mother demanded, so that the world could see. For days, right. So the world could see how her son was treated because he was a young black man. Disaster preparedness.
14, I think.
14, age 14. Yeah. 50 years ago, this occurred. 10 years ago, Katrina. 50 years ago, 10 years ago, we are constantly seeing these disasters. Some are natural, some are man-made, but they all can be prepared for. And that is what we're here talking about. Miss Frazier, you're concerned about schools. You're concerned about how the schools would treat your grandson and other children. You weren't satisfied with finding a school. You moved on. You decided you wanted to be a little bit more in charge. Tell us about the structure of the homeschooling and the school district, and the fact that you found out that there was an election for school district trustees, and you ran for and won one of those positions.
Oh yeah, I did. I served on the school board, but that was many years ago. That was back in the late 80s, early 90s. So I have an understanding of what school is from the inside out. But I think, fast forward to second grade, when I pulled my grandson out after the end of the second grade year, I was really looking forward. And when you talk about that disaster, I could see the disaster coming in the global economy, and schools not really preparing our youth for what lies ahead for them in this coming economy. And so that, coupled with the challenges that I was facing in terms of his behavior, and school seeing it as such a negative, I decided that's it. I'm just going to find an alternative, and that alternative for me was homeschool. There are a number of different alternatives available through homeschool. Some of it involves transition, where kids go to school 3 days a week and they're homeschooled 2 days a week. I chose the full-time homeschool selection for my grandson. Well, and he's now in 6th grade, by the way.
Yeah, well, philosophically, since we know the kids are learning 24/7, you know,
Yes.
I mean, whatever they dream about, they're learning there too. Homeschooling is what we all do.
Yes.
And we end up sometimes adding to that or complementing that with what goes on in public school. Sometimes it's the exact opposite. We find ourselves teaching one thing at home, school teaching another at school. And that conflict shows up when we start looking at the statistics of how well our kids do in school, how well they end up doing socially, and ultimately how the relationship with them, and if they're young men, we end up talking about the relationship with them and the police. And that is another area of disaster that we find socially taking place here.
And that experience with the police, by the way, starts very early, because we're seeing now that police have a permanent presence even in elementary school.
Yes.
So
we need to make it a positive presence.
It should be.
It should be.
I'm not even convinced that police need to be in elementary school or middle
school. Well, people
school,
who are involved in public safety,
yes.
and in public safety is something that we've pretty much assigned to police. But as we go back and look at the disasters that take place, when we find the people that are able to relieve us from the disaster, we find certainly there are some police and regular public safety people involved. But we usually find that your next door neighbor, your down the street neighbor is going to be your first level of secure relief. And you're going to represent that to them also. This is where we have the ability to take control of our disasters and our potential disasters before they occur. We know that as they do occur, we, as much as we want to depend on FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Association, we know that they don't really do the job. If we thought that they did, let's go back and look at what they did with Katrina. And there are still people who are suffering from the so-called aid that FEMA came up with. They came up with these formaldehyde-laced trailers. That's like providing, instead of giving you some angel dust to smoke, we're going to just move you into an angel dust house, and as you breathe, you'll just get high and crazy. I mean, does that make sense? But that's what they did. We as individuals have the power to not allow those kind of things to take place. When we do see them taking place, why would we sit up and argue with FEMA about the fact that they gave us some formaldehyde angel dust houses? We just don't move in them. I mean, people, when they walk you to the end of the plank, when they show you the plank, don't get on it. We don't have to do these silly things. If the kids are not learning at school, we need to stop sending them. We need to stop letting school board meetings take place with the regular agenda, and your kids are not learning anything. We need to put a stop to it.
Supplement their education.
You're doing that already. Now, you're either doing a good job or a bad job. You're either supplementing their education by making them think that those teachers at school are right and they're doing the right thing. You're just dumb and not picking it up. Huh? Or they can do the right thing. The parent can do the right thing by saying, wait a minute, let's supplement this school by, no TV. Let's get some books read here. And what are you doing on that computer and that little PlayStation thing there? How is that helping you?
Read some books with the children. Go through the encyclopedia with the children. Spend time going over what they're learning at school with the children.
What do you mean read a dictionary? There's nothing in the dictionary but words. Right. Learn how to read the words and what they mean. Parents, I hear a great piece by First Five right now that they're promoting, and it's something that common sense certainly would tell you makes this true. That if you talk to your children and read to your children and provide them with legitimate information, they will what? Learn legitimate information. If you talk to your child, if you talk to your baby, goo goo, wah wah, oogie gaga, what the heck is the child supposed to learn? You've got to talk to them. So this is one of those issues of common sense and it makes sense. Talk to your child, speak clearly to your
right.
child, sing to your child, read to your child. They're going to learn how to do those things back. This is Empire Talks Back. I'm Wallace Allen. We're visiting with Cynthia Frazier, a grandmother, a mother who has decided that homeschooling was the right thing for her grandson and saw the disaster coming and prepared for it. We're talking disaster preparedness in a probably way you haven't heard it discussed before, but that's good. Maybe you'll pay attention. We'll be right back after this short break with more things for you to be prepared to handle in your future in order to make your future better. We'll be right back.
And I think it's gonna be a long, long time till touchdown brings me round again to find I'm not the man that think I am at home.
Publish your legal notice in West Side Story newspaper. For the best service and the best rates, call 909-384-8131. Publishing legal notices in the city and county of San Bernardino since 1990. West Side Story provides friendly expert service. Call 909-384-8131 to benefit from budget-friendly rates. Whether a fictitious business name, a name change, a divorce summons, or any other legal or public notice, call West Side Story newspaper 909-384-8131. 909-384-8131. That's 909-384-8131.
KCAA Radio, AM 1050. Hey, tell a friend. AM 1050.
I don't understand.
This is Empire Talks Back. I'm Wallace Allen on the case for truth and justice. And are you going to believe your eyes? You know, I guess there was a statement that somebody said something about, are you going to believe me or are you going to believe your lying eyes? Well, folks, disaster is all around us, and preparing for disaster, the potential disaster, is important. There's going to be at least, well, Mr. Evans, what do you say? At least 2 Supreme Court judges that will be selected
appointed
or
by the next president. That's very likely.
Now, you know, what's so important about the Supreme Court, except the fact that, you know, it's a lifetime position for people who will make decisions about the lifetime activities of the rest of the citizenry in the United States.
Well,
I remember when people said it was really, 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 really important that we get a black person to, you know, back on the Supreme Court after Justice Marshall was no longer there, and we can be fooled. You know, you can be fooled. You can judge a book by its cover and open the book up and realize that that's all it had was a cover. No storyline. Supreme Court justices are very, very important. I don't know who to select, but I think selecting people who have a diverse attitude is important. And we've seen people get selected who we thought were going to act one way, and they pretty much acted 180 degrees different.
That's happened.
And so it's an important thing to do. How do you express your understanding of that importance? Right now, we're going to select a president that's going to select 2 Supreme Court justices who will be there to echo their importance for, I don't know, 10 years, maybe 15 years. If you pick them young enough, it could last longer than that.
For the rest of their life. That's how long they get to stay. And what does the Supreme Court do? It's the final stop in interpreting the law. And what is their power? Well, in the past, they said that things like slavery were legal.
Yeah.
Turns out today, they say, oh, no, you can't do that. That's illegal. So it depends on who is in the Supreme Court, what the law actually means when you apply it. So if you have a group on one side who says, we want to take our country back, you know, we're make it 1950 again. Well, what does that imply?
Whoa, 1950, that was a couple of years before they killed Emmett Till.
Well,
we were not fully integrated in the military.
Let the folks go to the history books if they don't know that history. Yeah. That's the idea.
But this is
they
the
want
good
to
old
create
days.
A different situation. Well, how might they do that? If they get a president who puts two conservative justices on the Supreme Court, now a lot of decisions that have been close, they've been decided by the swing vote, who is conservative, but sometimes he votes with the liberals. That's the composition of the court today. So you've got this one person who is swinging it one way or the other, or because of the way it works out, maybe somebody else plays that role. The point is, if you had two more conservative justices, as opposed to what you get now, which is the replacement of a liberal and the replacement of the swing vote, probably with another liberal. That kind of stays where it is if one of them swings from time to time. But if you get two conservatives, the fear is that this would create a bloc that would continuously rule in such a way that things would dramatically change here. See, what happened in the past, we changed the law. There were protests, demonstrations. The law changed eventually. Well, now our plan needs to change because we have a different situation.
Let's not move so quickly here.
All right.
We're talking about Supreme Court justices. We're talking about the power of the next president. He will get to, and we also have to acknowledge that even though they may sit down a couple of years in advance and decide to be president, and they run and they get lucky enough to win, it doesn't really make them a prophet. You know, it doesn't really mean that they're able to predict the future or to actually tell how a person that they have selected today is going to vote in 5 years
in the future.
On an issue.
No. You can look at their record.
So we
and
must.
That's what the confirmation process.
So to truthfully push this issue of disaster preparedness in the world of politics, what we're really saying is that, folks, whoever you elect, you're not going to be able to walk away and forget the fact that they've been elected and, you know, just go do what you think you want to do. Our political circumstance requires vigilance, constant participation, and we can expect that, well, maybe if we elect a liberal, he's going to select a liberal or two for the Supreme Court. But he can't always tell what the response is going to be. I mean, you just cannot tell. So
let's look at history. Hold on one second, if I may. History says that liberals stay liberal on the Supreme Court. Conservatives, amazingly, over time, become more liberal. This is what history of the court shows. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, but I think, and I think that historical perception is probably very correct. We have not seen, well, I mean, even with the Supreme Court justice we have now, we've seen him flip-flop and kind of make so-called staunch Republicans a little disturbed about some of the decisions that he sided on. But the big point is that there's an election coming. We've got to participate in that election. We've got to not be nosed or pulled around by our nose by lobbyists. We've got to figure out exactly who we want, and hopefully when that person is elected, they'll be able to act the way that they said they would. But Leonard, Ms. Frazier, one of the things that we all talk about is that when they get to promising what they're going to do when they get to be president, that is all a lot of great rhetoric. We find that everybody, once they're elected, once they get their briefing,
the moment of truth,
their briefing or their debriefing, whatever you want to call it, their minds, their attitudes change. It's something as if they find out something that, well,
classified
they obviously find out some things that the rest of us still don't know about, and they end up changing the course of their direction, regardless of what the course was when they came in. Yes, we can was Mr. Obama's push, and, well, yes, we almost can was the result. We get the same thing with Bush. We get the same thing with whoever's in there. I'm not sure what that information is that they can't share with us. I don't know if
it changes. Well, but it's like I'd like to, but I can't. That's what it comes down to. They realize this.
And I'm not so sure that it's internal as much as it could be external, because if you look at what's happening now with social media having such a huge influence on politics, education, all of these industries that typically
accurate
served
information pretty quickly
in a vacuum. And so now you have this social media push that can really rally very quickly, and serve as that influence.
Right.
Whereas the Supreme Court, I mean, they operated in a vacuum for
But they're
most
the
of my
law.
life.
But
They're not social commentary and opinion. They are the law.
They are.
Disagree with them, and the police knock on your door. You disagree with a social commenter, and they send you a trite email. So what? I mean, it's a whole different game. And
we don't want to underestimate the power of the people. See,
because
the social media has brought that back around to where people now have confidence in their power as a result of realizing that, whoa, wait a minute, my little dumb idea isn't such a dumb idea at all. It only seemed dumb when I talked to the so-called official people around me, but when I talk to the real people, the regular folks, they agree with me.
They like it. Yeah.
We can win, and I think that's a critical thing for us to bring into this, into the conversation as we look at disaster preparedness. As we go back now and look at Katrina again, we'll realize that there was one radio station in New Orleans that dedicated itself to staying on the air and giving people a means of communicating with each other, taking away that feeling of just desperate isolation, that there's nobody around, period, that cares. That radio station did a wonderful job. They received many awards, but more than that, they received the confidence of their listeners because they kept telling the truth about what they knew. And that's what social media can do. We can't always believe everything that we hear, but because of the instantness of social media, we can verify. We can vet information that's being brought to us. We can find out, is it true? And that gives us a pretty strong power. Accurate information is pretty powerful.
It is.
Idea. As we're looking, for instance, at the coming Olympics, one of the things that they keep telling us about Rio, about Brazil, is that the waterways are totally polluted, and that the activities that take place on the water are dangerous. Well, as we've talked about it, slowly moving into it, everybody said, well, don't worry about it, it's going to be okay. The Olympic Committee, put their fist down and said, hey, this water is going to be the water we do this stuff in, and it's going to be all right, and I don't want to hear no mess about it. Sorry, guys. Social media said, no, we're going to talk about all of these little strange brown things floating in the water. All of the fact that everybody that gets in it ends up with some kind of little viral infection, the level of which is, I will bet you that between now and the actual Olympic date, they will either find a new venue or they're going to find some kind of way to clean those waterways up, because we, the people, will not stand for it just so a few can make some money. And that's my prediction. I'm not sure if it'll work out that way, but the
people have the final power.
We're
the sovereign citizens of this country, and we can elect who we want.
Disaster
if we don't like them, we can pull them out and put somebody else in.
And as those who do ultimately have the power, we need to prepare for the disasters as opposed to simply reacting to them. And I'm saying that not because it's my brilliant idea, but because I see people doing that, and they've made me wake up to the fact again that we don't have to wait. We should not wait. Katrina was a total disaster because there were so many people who didn't believe the announcement, because the announcements of the past were not accurate. The announcements of the past were drama filled, and it wasn't as bad as they said it was going to be. So people didn't believe it. But the new information coming in today or at 10 years ago telling you about the possible effects of Katrina many people should have left, and many people wish that they had who didn't.
And I think you said the levee broke in 1920. The same thing happened once
Yeah,
before.
but then again, as we look back at it, the question of whether it was broke or not was answered more by the fact that it was blown up in order to save one portion of the city. They sacrificed another. When we do these things,
the pressure on the other.
Well, now here's the deal. Here in California, we've had fires, and many of us have been told to prepare for the fire and to pack up those things that are important. That means you're going to establish some priorities. We as individuals do it. As a society, we do it also. So when we decide to sacrifice one area of a city to save another, that's a pretty powerful decision. We're saying that some lives are not as important as others, or we may be saying that the structures are so critical and important it's going to cost us money. We end up making decisions based on issues other than compassion, issues other than the love of life, and we all individually do it. So we cannot get mad at society for doing the same thing. If that particular piece of paper and record is more important than those dishes over there, you've made that decision and you take them. Socially, we can say, downtown New Orleans is probably much more important to us in the long run than the houses in the 9th Ward that are owned by poor people who probably are not going to show up to vote, and we'll be able to get away with this.
And don't forget St. Louis, in those big storms a few years ago, they actually deliberately breached the levee upstream and flooded all these towns and fields.
That's right.
To save St. Louis.
That's right. And we understand it. We see it take place after it takes place, and we know the people who've been affected, destroyed by that. We have another level of understanding at that point. We have pain, we have anger, and it's all because we didn't totally prepare. Now, we understand that the levees above the 9th Ward were dug at a level not recommended. The Army Corps of Engineers recommended a 75-foot drop into of digging the steel girders 75 feet into the ground to anchor the levee. But they didn't have enough steel, and I think they only went 15 or 20 feet. That was a conscious decision. We lost lives as a result of that decision. Folks, I guess what we're saying is what I'm attempting to say is that with our politics, we have to step up and get involved. We have, in the case of our presidential race now, we have Mr. Trump, who's made it very interesting, but we see people lining up against him on both sides, both Republicans and Democrats, lining up to say, he's not going to be the guy. I don't know how that's going to end up, but I will say this, folks. If you think that the only people that are being denied the right to vote, that target is only going to be African Americans, I suggest you've got another thought coming. I think that you will see that if there are going to be too many votes delivered to Mr. Trump, that you will find there will be a denial of voting and votes from both sides, the Democrats and the Republicans. Not that I think Trump is a great potential president, but we've had many presidents that I didn't think were going to be any good or great, and the people who voted for them voted against the way I would have voted, but we're still here. We're still going strong. Having good politicians obviously is not a requirement for us to have a country that's successful and keeps going.
We have survived bad leadership.
We have survived bad leadership on an ongoing basis. We're surviving it now.
That's the beauty of the system that we have.
Why didn't that make me feel good?
Now, Mr. Trump,
it just occurred to me that what we're saying here is really true. We have survived and thrived despite bad leadership, crooked and corrupt leadership.
We as a whole.
We as a whole, as a nation. Individually, yeah, we have some issues.
Individually.
We still got something to fuss over.
Yes, absolutely. And the same applies to education. So as a whole, you probably do have a number of students that will go on and do well, but there are a number of other students that if they don't get a quality education, and we can talk about what quality is, that's subjective in some ways, but if they don't get a good education, what's going to happen to them?
Well, it's not just what happens to them. Okay, I'm
Them
looking.
and their impact.
I'm looking at a story about New Orleans as they talk about rebuilding, as they talk about wanting to upgrade the one thing that they're missing is big business, kind of like the city of San Bernardino. You've got a circumstance there where the schools were not good, the people didn't learn a lot, and as a result, they're not in a position to attract big business that requires people who are technically smart or socially smart or have demonstrated that they have the discipline to do research and to stay in a program long enough to graduate. Big business requires smart people to work. If we have not made our young people smart enough to contribute to the future of the growth of business, they're not the only ones that are going to suffer. We all suffer. If we don't make our young people as smart and as innovative as possible, we end up suffering. We as a society,
suffering in if we don't encourage this, bring it out.
We have to understand that it's not, that's Mary's son over there, and if he does real good, it's going to make my grandkid look stupid. So I'm not really concerned about. No, you better have Mary's son do well, because Mary's son may be the one that provides a job for your little grandson, who may not be as smart as you think he is.
And today it's not really about being smart; it's about being disruptive. And I had this conversation before I left formal education in the sense that we know it, because they kept saying, well, your grandson is disruptive. And I said, but in this economy, it's no longer if it's not broke, don't fix it. It's
and following
if
directions.
It's not broke, whoever breaks it first and then fixes it gets the prize. So
in business.
Yes, in business, and I mean that's what we're preparing our students for. I don't know what we're preparing our students for if we're not preparing them for the world of work.
You're preparing them to understand the importance of choices, of choosing to obey someone who knows what they're doing, or obeying someone who doesn't know what they're doing just because they're in charge, or figuring out what the situation is and doing what your brain ultimately tells you to do.
Now, there's where the disruptive comes, because they call it disruptive technology, something that's going to change things in a disruptive fashion. However, I have to point out here that all this energy is fine. It doesn't do anything until it's focused and channeled.
And if what really
it's like
matters,
a river going over a turbine, or a train if it's off the tracks, it doesn't have any direction, or a car with no steering wheel. So the discipline of, doing what's necessary to get recognized, to then make your contribution, that is an important part in leadership.
But that all is done to prepare you for the unexpected.
Well, this is what you're going to face. Exactly.
This is where leadership, this is where everything that we've gone through to bring us to a certain point actually proves itself. In a moment of disaster, in a moment of unexpected emergency, how well do you think on your feet? How well are you able to recognize resources where others see nothing? Let's go back about, was it maybe a year and a half ago, where the ferry over in Asia place, I can't think of exactly where, but it was a ferry, had a bunch of students on it, and as the ferry was sinking, the instructions from the captain, who was one of the first people to get off the boat, was you people stay put. Do not move around, stay put. Well, there were some students who realized that staying put meant for sure they were going to drown in this little compartment that was filling with water.
Okay.
But there were some students who stayed put in that same circumstance, and there were other students who said, sorry, Charlie, getting out of here. Now, we'll go back and we'll realize that some of the students lived and some of the students did not. The only ones that lived, however, were the ones who broke the rule, saw the emergency, felt the issue, and decided immediately to do something different. Folks, that's what we're facing. We're facing decisions on a daily basis that we don't know the full impact of these decisions, but I can tell you that if you don't give them your full attention, they will be things that can change your life to 180 degrees, from one of success to one of total failure, and one of apparent total failure into one of success. Learning critical thinking, encouraging critical thinking is something that we have to do for our children and that we have to involve ourselves in, and we cannot tell our children, I'm older than you, I'm smarter than you. I'm the adult, you're the child. Sorry, folks, our children tend to be a little smarter than we were at their age, and in some cases that means they're smarter than we are now. So
they're ready for more than that.
They're ready for more, and we need to give them more. We need to pay much more attention to them because we have not been given the world. We've been loaned the world to take care of it for our children and grandchildren.
And I'm going to disagree with you a little bit.
Please.
Because when we first started this conversation, Leonard talked about how when he was, I think he said 6 years old in school, there were kids handling power tools. There were kids doing all these exceptional things that we might not have thought of for a kid that age.
Right.
So that's no different than what our kids are doing today. We kind of see it as, they're smarter, and no, not really.
Well,
it's just that they have more outlets and more opportunities because the industrial age is over. We don't need hordes of people to pile into a plant, as they used to call it, or factory, at 6 o'clock a.m. and then do what you're told to do and don't ask any questions until 2 p.m.
Work the assembly line.
When that
Doesn't
bell
work like
rings.
that anymore.
Right, and so we don't need that anymore. And a lot of those youth probably would have been smarter then, were smarter. It's just that they weren't allowed to show that because kids.
Well, they didn't exactly. They didn't have these opportunities available to them. I was held back a year, and I still graduated a year ahead because I went to no 8th grade. We learned all this, done metal shop, built a firing cannon, cast it out of bronze. This was what was going on then. And today, with your grandson, the people didn't realize that leadership is rare. You need to encourage it. Yeah, there's other issues, but that's the thing. What they missed by not realizing how they could utilize his leadership skills is very similar to what has been happening across the country. America's been denying itself, bottom line, all of the benefits that could now be part of America. Eventually, it's going to happen because more people recognize it.
So we end up hurting ourselves as we attempt to hurt others. We need to realize that this is a big party, and everybody's got a song, and everybody's got a dance, and we do well to pay attention to each other. This is Empire Talks Back. I want to thank you for spending your time with us today. I hope you're a little more prepared for the disaster pending, at least in your mind, realizing that you have to get prepared. And on a practical sense, just in your cars, folks, be sure you carry a little extra water, a few things that make life easier for you when you run into a problem. This is Empire Talks Back. I'm Wallace Allen on the case. Truth and Justice. Be here next week under two circumstances. One, the good Lord's willing. Two, if the creek don't rise. God bless you. Thank you for listening. See you next week.
You're on board KCAA's Inland Talk Express. KCAA, Loma Linda, 1050 AM, the station that leaves no listener behind.
NBC Sports Radio update starts now.
8 games underway in Major League Baseball. Let's get you caught up. I'm Pete Fox. The Blue Jays continuing to roll, swinging some hot bats. 3 home runs have staked them to a 4-0 lead over the Detroit Tigers. Encarnacion homers again. That's his 4th blast in his last 6 at-bats. Josh Donaldson has his 36th. Pilar went deep as well. The Mets have struck first at Citi Field. They lead Boston 1-0. Cleveland up on the Angels 2-0. Tampa Bay has a 1-0 advantage over KC. And Miami's up on Strasburg and Washington 3-0. On to the NFL, where we have 2 games today. At 4 Eastern, the Texans are in New Orleans to take on the Saints. And the Cardinals face the Raiders in Oakland at 8 Eastern. Action from yesterday. Josh McCown played most of the game for the Cleveland Browns, 17 of 23 for 117